Well, the name of the book that I co-authored is entitled Homeschooling: Answers to Most Commonly Asked Questions. And I co-authored it with one of my colleagues that I've worked with for years, Robert Wyndham. And I had been working in the homeschooling field for at least 10 years. And this was 19 years ago when homeschooling was popular, but nothing like how it is now. And parents had a lot, mainstream parents still had a lot of questions. It was still considered, oh, homeschooling, and you lifted your eyebrows a little bit. Really? And so there was a lot of misinformation out there, and there was a lot of needed information. So the textbook, the publisher that I worked with is Creative Teaching Press, which is an unusual fit for a book on homeschooling, because Creative Teaching Press, their market is to traditional classroom teachers and parents who are usually buying materials for helping their children in traditional classroom settings. However, they were wanting to branch out and be a little bit more mainstream. Their market had been basically in teacher supply stores and online to teachers and parents, and they were now getting involved in marketing more to Barnes and Nobles and Borders, that type of thing. Well, there were a lot of books, not particularly textbooks, but a lot of books out on homeschooling. These books were much more written from the viewpoint of parents that had tackled homeschooling and were bucking the system. They weren't written from a system point of view in how mainstream education could support and help homeschooling. So to my knowledge, it was very limited, coming from a more mainstream textbook position. Well, I had a good friend, June Hetzel, who was working as an in-house editor at the time at Creative Teaching Press. And she mentioned that she thought, boy, this might be the right time for them with some of the talking that they had been doing and some of the ways that they were wanting to expand. So I talked with her, and I had come from a pretty traditional background of homeschooling. I had started a private school homeschooling program through Whittier Christian, and then I was working at the county in a county supervised program. I had a colleague who was also working at Orange County Department of Ed with me, but he'd come from a background of homeschooling his own children in a much less structured setting. So I really thought it would be great if we could team up so that we could present both more of an unschooling answers to those type of questions, as well as more of a structured approach. So Robert and I got together, wrote a proposal. I talked with June quite a bit about that, and then we basically wrote a sample chapter, and we wrote the answers that we wanted to, since our book was going to be based on commonly asked questions that we were going to answer. We had a list of all of them with bullet points of how we would address those and how we would integrate the two philosophies. So we wrote that up, and then met with the team at Creative Teaching Press. And this was a very different approach for them to go to this type of book. So that they were ready for it. And so they accepted the proposal, and then we negotiated terms, and luckily June was their editor, and so it was great to have someone who, because June was by this time very familiar with editing and the publishing house as well as with homeschooling. So she was the perfect person to be our liaison at Creative Teaching Press for that. Basically, we worked a lot with June, our editor. Initially we met with a larger team and ironed out the specifics of that. And June was the liaison between us and the graphic design. So basically, they came up with a vision of how they wanted it laid out. Creative Teaching Press is very specific with their 2-page layouts, and they were very specific on how they wanted the pages laid out. So we worked within that framework, and we were given opportunities for quite a bit of feedback on that. But June was our liaison in that. Yes, there was. There were basic graphics, and then also we had a unique feature in our book because we decided to highlight families that were already homeschooling. And so each chapter had a black and white picture of the family and little blurbs from them on what worked and what didn't work. So we had their pictures all throughout, which made it really fun to have people who were actually doing it and their input on that. We did not personally, although I was very involved, and so was Robert with homeschooling. Creative Teaching Press, I believe, did quite a bit before they decided to accept our proposal. Yeah, there's always hurdles. The first hurdle was being edited and synthesizing two voices. Robert's voice, because he was more of an unschooling perspective, was the harder voice to fit in there. My voice was more along the lines of Creative Teaching Press. And so, but what Robert had was so amazing. And June, as our editor, saw that and wanted to keep that as much as possible. So it was a hurdle to synthesize the two voices and to have the richness of both of our experiences and the families that we were interviewing, but still be a cohesive whole. Yes, I have seen it in action. It was published and it actually did quite well. Creative Teaching Press was very pleased with it. They got it into Barnes & Noble, as well as Borders, as well as selling in their traditional venues. And it won, the year it was published, it won the award for parent information. So it had a little sticker on it when it sold, so that was quite exciting. And I've had a lot of families that have contacted me after reading it to tell me that it has really helped them, and also with follow-up questions. Because we wrote this 19 years ago, the book is out of print now, but I was able to retain the rights. So when I retire, I would like to go back and update and rewrite. I think the book would have a whole different shape to it after 20 more years of experience. But there is a lot of information that could be a core. Everything about this was rewarding. I really loved working with Robert. Our styles were very compatible, even though they were different. Having June as our editor smoothed the process so much because she had such a heart for homeschooling. She took a lot of the hits between the publishing company and two authors passionate about homeschooling, and she really smoothed that process. Walking into Barnes & Noble's and seeing our book there was an amazing, amazing highlight. We still have it in our CHEP library where I work, and it's fun. Every once in a while a parent will check it out and go, "You wrote that book?" So it's fun. No, I think there's different types of writers, and then there's the type of writers as a teacher of writing. I see lots of little students who I just know are going to be writing, so they're carrying around their notebook and they're writing in all of their free time. I wasn't that way. I like to write, and I do quite a bit of writing, but I considered myself more of a specialty writing. I knew my subject, I knew a lot about writing, and so I was able to put that down to help other people teach writing. I knew a lot about homeschooling. So in that aspect, it seemed like a natural fit, but I never thought when I was growing up or even in college that I would be a published writer.